Hi, I'm back again. The last time we met, we spoke about cronyism. This time, I wish to speak about Onionism. I'll explain what Onionism is a bit later, but may I begin with a statement of extreme gratitude to the farmer or the farmers who grew these onions. May I express my gratitude to the warehouse keeper who stored these onions. May I thank the transporter who brought these onions from the warehouse to the retail markets in my city. I do not know where these onions came from, but I know that without the effort of others, these onions would not be here with me. Thank you very much. Onions are very pungent, greatly loved by a whole lot of Indians. But when we eat the onion, we seldom thank the onion farmer. We think farmers are our slaves who ought to be growing onion year in and year out, every season, in Maharashtra, in Madhya Pradesh, in Karnataka, in Bihar, in Gujarat, in Tamil Nadu, and across the country, so as to excite us, to keep our taste buds served. We love the onion a whole lot. But do we really love and admire and say thanks to the onion farmer? We don't. That's exactly what I mean by Onionism. Onionism is one component of India's way of living, just as cronyism is. Onionism refers to our extraordinary, ill-mannered greed. We think the onion farmer ought to be growing onions to serve us. The warehouse keeper should keep it between two harvest seasons, but we would call him a holder, give him filthy names. We think the banker who lends money in order that the onion farmer be paid while the onion is kept in inventory is a greedy financier. We have the lousiest descriptive words for the onion farmer, the warehouse keeper, and the banker, and we all think these guys are our slaves who would be bringing onions to our plate. That is Onionism. We need to put an end to Onionism. We need to restore the respectability that the farmer, the warehouse keeper, the banker, and the transporter deserve. You know what? Every time we have an Independence Day, we think we suddenly wake up to be better Indians. We wish each other this great Indianness, but it's at this time that we ought to be thinking of the onion farmer as one among us. We need to ask a question. How free is the onion farmer? How free is the onion farmer? Do we believe that he deserves the same kind of freedom which we want for ourselves? That's an issue here. We ought to be giving the onion farmer greater freedom to choose his sowing seasons, to choose his harvesting times, to choose to whom he sells his onions to at a price of his choice. It's very important. Look at this. You and I are professionals. Can we ever expect another man to have a preemptive claim on our services? No, we think we ought to be endowed with all the freedom to work in Sydney, to work in Toronto, to work in Boston, to work in Johannesburg. We love it all. But the onion farmer doesn't have any of these freedoms. Consider this. Until 2003, the onion farmer couldn't export onions. We had quantitative restrictions. We ought to be thanking the then Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee for having revoked quantitative restrictions. How nice. 11 years later, we stared at the prospect of a ban on the export of onions. How silly and how funny. The ban on exports on onions took place in 2007 when the Food Minister then, the Minister for Food, was coerced into banning the exports of onions because Delhi needed 400 tons of onions every day. In order to keep the residents of Delhi happy, farmers of Maharashtra had to forego their profits. This is a part of Onionism. Present, the incumbent Minister for Food, he thinks onion prices are up because hoarders are hoarding it. We have all these negative views of onions, the supply chain. We think that all of these guys constitute an enslaved supply chain that ought to be supplying onions to us. I think we need to put an end to onionism. Consider this. What would you and I do if a hoarder did not store onions? Onions are seasonal. They're grown across multiple seasons. Someone ought to be aggregating onions grown in Maharashtra, grown in Karnataka, grown in Madhya Pradesh. It needs aggregation. It needs holding so that you and I will get a gradual, smooth supply of onions day in and day out. To be calling these people, the aggregators, hoarders is not okay. We ought to change our mindset. So we need more freedom for the onion farmer. They would be producing more because they could earn more profits. If you and I want to reduce costs in terms of running our households, look at what the farmer would want, better prices, so that he too can be well off. So we need to look at these three things. If these are accomplished, the farmer would produce more. But what do you think is going to happen now? What is required now is an extraordinary boost to productivity. India's productivity, or the production of onions per hectare, is about 14 tons, a paltry 14 tons. Onion farmer needs more freedom. The aggregators, the warehouse keepers, the financiers need more freedom so that we get more onions. They would produce more then. More would be stored. More would be financed. Everyone has a stake in their actions because these things would endo upon them profit. If you and I are looking to cut costs, those guys are looking to boost revenues, and that's fair, absolutely, in a marketplace. We should not envy them for their profits. That's not good. Just as you and I have our own freedoms as carpenters, plumbers, auto rickshaw drivers, advocates, scientists, software professionals, to make the kind of money you and I think we deserve and we desire, let's give the same kind of freedom to the supply chain in the onion industry to pursue profits with complete freedom. This is the message that the Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, ought to be giving the onion industry. Jai Hind.